Hey guys, it is Friday night. You know what it means? It's time for Althing Considered, your favorite streaming heathen show where we talk about the news, events, and topics you want to discuss. And after a 2 week absence, I'm Lauren Crow, President CEO of the Troth. Excited to be back with you guys, especially after having COVID last weekend.
Oh no.
So the doctor ended up, I went to the doctor today for my wellness, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's COVID." I'm like,
Oh,
Thanks.
yeah. So just fair warning: if you get a really bad stomach bug without typical COVID symptoms, but you're running a high fever, that could be COVID.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, I had the worst stomach virus I think I've had since grade school, and yeah, my doctor said, "Oh yeah, that's the new strain that's going around." So,
Oh, terrific.
Yay.
yeah. So I apologize if my brain's only about 80% here because I'm still recovering from that. So,
Understandable.
but for those of you who don't know me, like I said, I am President and CEO of the Troth. I may have previously seen me on YouTube on my old show Heathen Talk, as well as my podcast Heathen History, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre. We have new episodes coming soon. Finally, after surviving everything that's happened. And I've been heathen for 20 years, Githia of Black Bear Kindred almost that long. And I don't know, I'm pretty boring beyond that. I spend all my time working and doing Troth stuff. So yeah, I will pass it to my co-hosts to introduce themselves.
I am Piper Perry. I am the Public Relations Director of the Troth. And also I am Githia of Mountain Raven Kindred in beautiful Colorado. And looking forward to tonight's topic.
I am too.
Hello, everyone. I am Jay. I am the secretary of the Troth, and I unfortunately am unaffiliated with any kindred, but am based out of Orlando, Florida, for what that's worth.
We keep trying to adopt you, but you know.
Yeah, distance being a whole thing is really
Wait.
rough. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how I would uproot the whole everything and the everyone and.
I understand. I've had to think about that a few times when I've gotten a few job offers. Like, can I move?
Yeah, same.
Which kind of falls into tonight's topic in a way.
Mhm.
Which tonight we're going to be talking about family, both the historical perspective of family, but also kind of our modern ideas of family and heathenry. And so I think that's a pretty important topic, especially if you are in the US, because, well, we are coming upon one of the season of having to gather with family.
Mhm.
Thanksgiving, Christmas, all those fun times. So it's actually been a pretty light week this week as far as news. So I'm thankful for that. Nothing. I'm not talking to like real reporters this week. It's great. For those of you who don't know, those of you who weren't paying attention, about a month ago when we had a guy who's accused of murder, say the Odinites were doing it, not Odin. It's Odinites. I had a media tour for a while there, so it's kind of nice when I get to say, "Oh, look, only a couple of news stories." And of course, the big one is Iceland is about to get bigger, literally.
Possible volcanic eruptions. Yeah, they've shut down whole parts of Iceland. And sort of following the news on that one.
Yeah, they've shut down parts of Iceland. They are actually they've evacuated several towns, and some of the biggest like tourist destinations, like the Blue Lagoon, water, geothermal, and all that, are in the path of where if this volcano erupts, and I was, as a geology nerd, they're getting swarms of 500 to 600 volcano-related earthquakes a day at this point.
Oh, yuck.
So,
Okay.
it is definitely, people are getting displaced. There's some issues with businesses. So, as you know, Iceland per capita probably has the highest number of heathens, due to both the low population and having one of the oldest heathen communities there. So definitely offer prayers to our fellow heathens in Iceland, because it is going to be rough. And I definitely do worry. I have reached out to see what we can do as far as Red Hammer, what we could do to help those who might be displaced, and what help they might need. So an important one to watch and keep an eye on. Not only this, because if the problem with this particular area is this could also severely inhibit our ability to get to Europe from North America, or North Europeans to get to North America, because volcanic dust is glass, essentially, for those of you who don't know. And it can, it will basically kill an airplane if you fly through it. So, like I said, it's a big deal. It's, it can potentially cause some economic issues worldwide if this becomes a pyroclastic or an explosive volcano. If it does more like what we see in Hawaii, then a little bit less of a threat. But usually in that area, that's not particularly what we see as far as the kind of volcanic eruptions. However, I was talking to a couple of people, and I would really love to. I've been watching this. I'm going to tie this back into heathenry. Hilda Ellis Davidson actually has a theory that Ragnarok and their ideas of Ragnarok are actually based on a volcanic eruption similar to this one.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, you've never seen a volcano erupt. Right?
Right.
And then you move to Iceland and you see your very first volcano, you're going to think the world is ending.
Yes, you are. That's a really good theory, actually. I like it.
And so I'm really looking forward to it, watching this and seeing, because I am very strongly on the ground that the idea of Ragnarok is heavily influenced by both Christianity and also influenced by volcanoes. But so definitely worth it. And this could potentially prove or disprove, or at least lay more evidence into that theory about what influenced that particular telling of Ragnarok.
Oh, that'll be cool. Yeah, that'll be cool to keep track of and see how that story evolves and changes. Excellent.
Yeah. So we have big announcements. Are you excited?
I'm excited.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to Costa Rica next year.
Excellent. All right.
And I hope as many of you as possible will join me at Frith Forge in Costa Rica in March. Because the Ásatru Association of Ásatru Yggdrasil Costa Rica is sponsoring Frith Forge this year. So we're going to be at this wonderful resort. And it's going to be a wonderful event. I'm really looking forward to it. They've worked really hard on it. And you can get details on that on our website, troth.org. Also, Winter Trothmoot is coming up. That is going to be on the 12th through the 14th of January. I can remember the end. I had to think about the beginning. And that is a virtual event. It's free. Or not free, excuse me. It's a virtual event. It's $25 for the weekend. But all of that money goes back into paying for our in-person Trothmoot, as well as providing scholarships for people to attend that. And that is in part because our in-person Trothmoot this year is going to be in California. It is going to be more expensive. Something like 2/3 of the campgrounds in California, Washington, and Oregon have been destroyed by a wildfire in the past 2 years. So it's hard to find a place. The fact that we found a place, we feel lucky. But that is a huge thing. And so we do need to kind of offset that. But we're going to have rituals, talks, We're going to have Saranthon, who's one of our co-hosts here. He's going to be doing his intuitive rune reading class. I'm going to be doing my folk magic class, which I travel all over the U.S. to do, to teach folk magic. We're going to have a screening of Torture in Our Name, a movie from the National Religious Coalition Against Torture. Just a lot of really great stuff coming up. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then, of course, every Thursday night from now until Yule, on YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram and Facebook Reels.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's it. YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook Reels. That's right. We will be having Thursday night Sunwhite candle lighting. So if you would like to join along.
Yes, and Sunwhite we talked about last week. And yeah, it's actually a really, at least celebrating once, to be clear, it's a really deepening way to be in practice. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the reels that we're putting out on it too.
My Sunwhite altar is right behind me.
Awesome.
I'm the one filming them. So first one came out last Thursday, and we will have the rest of them every Thursday night until Yule. As a way to kind of join, I have written my own kind of Sunwhite kit, inspired by the one that's been put out by the original kind of Sunwhite candle group. So great for it. And that's it. As far as our announcement, that's it. Anyway, if you want more information on all of that, you can go over to our website, thetroth.org. Check that out. We've got a lot of other really great smaller events coming up, regional events, meetups for different areas. I know we've got one coming up in New York City. I know there is an Oracular Safe meetup in San Francisco. We've got a lot of stuff coming up. So you definitely want to go to our website and check out what we've got going on. All right. So tonight's topic is really great. So tonight we are talking about, what does family mean? Don't call me brother. I want to start with that, guys. There is nothing that annoys me more than when some rando jumps into our heathenry on Reddit, right?
Yep.
Or a group, and immediately starts addressing me as brother. Number one, I am not a man. Granted, my gender is girl, but girl if you bought it on Wish, but still. Number two, it bugs me, the kind of assumed familiarity people. And I realize that's my baggage from growing up in evangelical Christianity, right?
Yes.
Where
I have the same
brothers
baggage.
and sisters in Christ.
Yes.
But oh man, it just trips me out. I hate it because, to me, if I call someone my brother, that's an earned position in my life, right? Because and that kind of falls into what we're talking about tonight. But I am not.
Sibling implies an intimate relationship that you don't have with a random stranger that walks up to you as much. And I kind of know where that's coming from, in that if you practice like me, we must be aligned. And they're so desperate, some people, to connect with somebody. It's oh my gosh, and it's wait a minute. Can I have your name?
Yeah, and that's the other thing, especially in places where you're super anonymous, like Discord, and you don't even know who to me, there's even a difference between being in a Troth space where people have their names Facebook, and being in a space where I don't know. From all I know, you are the same guy who tried to rob a bank here one time with a pipe bomb that you made by wrapping a baguette in duct tape.
Wow.
That sounds like a really resourceful individual. I'd like to
that
person.
That's one of the times that I went, I'm so shocked that didn't happen in Florida.
Yeah, right.
Might have. You don't know. Anything could happen here. Somebody might have robbed a store with a baguette and some duct tape, or a bank. There are no rules here.
Now, I will say
That's fantastic.
but when we talk about family, there are other people, other groups, other perspectives, we can say, within that share our gods. I don't necessarily think they share our faith, but once again, the opinions expressed here on that are of Lauren and not the Troth. But I personally don't believe most of the racist groups share our faith. I believe that we are kind of like two different religions that have the same names for our gods, or like Marvel versus mythology, right? It's kind of like that.
Right. Yeah, or like Unitarians
really
versus like
this idea of.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but they really want to push this heteronormative, Christianized, very modern idea of family. Because let's be honest here, their ideas of family, their Norman Rockwell-esque ideas of family are super modern. And, I wanted to look at this first from like a historical perspective to kind of debunk some of their ideas. And then I wanted to talk about like modern heathenry, how we see family, because it's going to be different to everyone. And then also how we understand family, like, and how we apply a lot of this kind of to the modern day. So, I mean, what was a typical Norse era family?
Have you ever been to one of those, like driven through the Midwest, like Kansas or Nebraska or, one of the flat states, and seeing like this little cluster of houses around and surrounded by huge fields?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very much like what historical families used to be like. I mean, you have grandma and grandpa, and then you have their children, and then you have who their children marry, depending on, how that spouse gets traded out. And you've got servants also during that period of time, and slaves, actually, in a lot of those places. But yeah, and you also have kids that aren't necessarily yours. And we can talk about those relationships. But yes, a heathen family, at least a typical Norse family, is depending on how the land is probably much bigger than the nuclear family that we have. And the problem, of course, with nuclear families are kind of radioactive. So
you're not wrong. Well, I think one of the other things with, as far as like, you and that, I think, I grew up, you're talking about the flat states. I grew up in the Mississippi River Delta.
Yeah.
Super common. I mean, like, you can't just run a farm with like one family. You have to have it takes a lot. And one nuclear, like one person, one small family. And so you end up with a situation where you've got to have a lot of labor. So if you think about farming and take all of our modern equipment out, it's a lot of physical human power to get that done, to sustenance. And Ben Wagoner and I were talking, and I forget how many hours it is, but it's thousands of hours to create one garment, from the shearing to the spinning to the weaving to the sewing.
Yeah. And then sometimes the head of the community asks for a sale.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Although I will say, usually with sales, there were specific people who made those. Like those were usually made by a tradesperson.
Well, I imagine it was done by a group of tradespersons.
Yeah, well, it was usually done by...
person. I can imagine a dozen people working on something like that. It would probably take the better part of a year.
Oh, yeah, at least.
Yeah.
And so you had all of these, and like everyone worked. because you had to.
Oh yeah.
Now imagine all of these people, all of your in-laws, all of your employees, your slaves, which I will say, I think a way to kind of picture the slavery in a way we more understand it would be like the indentured servitude that you saw in the colonial settler period in the Americas, where they were slaves, but they worked for X amount of time to pay off whatever that debt was. It wasn't perpetual bondage like slavery was later, chattel slavery.
Right.
Now imagine from this time of year until about March, you're stuck inside with them.
Yep. We joked last time about cannibals because we have one here in Colorado, but it's actually more likely that you have a lot of, and we have this today, right? We have this when you're trapped in a house with a bunch of people today, where you have a lot of violence, a lot of trauma happens in those environments. Also, a lot of fun, cool stories grandma tells to the children. All of that happens at the same time.
Now, let's add to this, there were also animals in the house.
Yes, there's also
animals.
Sheep are warm in the winter, though.
I know. So first of all, we can talk this out here. And here's the thing. Everyone worked in the fields. Everyone did everything. Everyone cooked. Everyone, we talk about a lot of the work that was women's work, but logic, right? Let's think logically here. Women also at the time were having a lot of children. So they needed to be closer to the home to nurse. They needed to be closer to home to do those things. So it would make sense they would be doing the chores closer to the home, but that didn't mean they weren't going out and doing all of the things men were doing. It didn't mean men didn't step in and sew, and as you have sail makers and all of that kind of thing. Everyone did everything to make sure stuff got done. Otherwise,
jobs weren't gendered. Unnecessary gendering. The jobs weren't gendered. It's who could do the job, basically, who's available.
Exactly. So I guess then the next step I want to talk about is specifically like how a family would decide who was part of the family. And we're talking about at birth. And there's the Usavatni. So those of you who are familiar with it, have kids, that is the basically being sprinkled and given a name. And while I know modern heathens tend to do it 9 days after the child is born, it could happen anywhere between right after the child took its first meal to 9 days or even longer if the father happened to be gone. If a baby was born, say, during raiding season. And then, of course, if the father couldn't, then it could also be another male member of the family, the eldest male member of the family. And that is definitely, it granted on that person spiritual, family, and personhood rights. And before that, if a family couldn't support that child, if the child was too ill or I hate to use the word, I hate to say this, but at the same time, I understand it. Mm-hmm. If a child was not compatible with life in these hard times, then they could leave that child out to be exposed, and it was not considered bad. It was because before that point in which they were essentially given a name, they were not considered a full person. They did not have their full soul, especially that part that tied them to family. And then after that, they were given a gift, and that gift was supposed to influence their weird, which I think is really cool. And that always like heavily influences the baby gifts I give people.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and I'm not going to lie, it may also, like, for instance, I gave a friend of mine, a coworker of mine had a baby, and his first baby. Okay, so first of all, his wife got pregnant while his first child was like 6 months old. They already weren't sleeping. So I made a diaper cake, and I specifically made it, and then I put a bunch of like sleepy time bath stuff in it.
Nice.
Because I wanted to make that child's weird be an influence that child be a sound sleeper.
Nice.
Because I was tired of my coworker falling asleep every day in his chair. Like every day it would start getting warm in the office and I have to poke it. Wake up, wake up. Oh, bless him. That's a lot. 2 under 2. Oof.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
And then, of course, fostering was incredibly common. And so in a time where infant mortality could sometimes be as high as 30% or more, and like I think 25% of couples had no children due to various and sundry reasons, fostering was a way to allow families with no children to help contribute to the community and raise children. It allowed families to create strong ties with each other than through marriage. One of the things I really loved, it allowed families to pass on trades to children outside their bloodline. Like if you were someone that had a job that was, you had a trade, a trade that was, you were a blacksmith and none of your children would be capable of carrying that on, you could foster a child and pass that trade on to him. And oftentimes those families of choice, those foster children, had much tighter relationships than, your not gonna say your blood children.
Right.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, if I recall hearing somewhere that according to the inheritance laws amongst the people of the North at the time, only the eldest son was able to inherit anything at all, and he inherited everything: land, titles, if there were any, wealth, all of it. And every other son got a hearty handshake and a pat on the back. And so for those that weren't interested in making their career, going a Viking constantly, as that could be, put a lot of wear and tear on one's life. It was a good way for second or younger sons to be able to get a livelihood that didn't necessarily come from their father. So it would make sense that a fosterling would have a closer relationship because they are inheriting a trade that they aren't getting from their own father. So that does make perfect sense.
Yeah, that was incredibly common for only the oldest male child to inherit all the way through till maybe 100 years ago in many places. That's why you see a lot of times wealthy families would often have 2 children. One of them would inherit, they would have 2 sons. The other son would go into the
monastery,
church.
Ding, ding, ding. Into good. In fact, that I'm gonna throw out my completely non-related heathen related history buff here. Henry VIII was actually groomed to be a cardinal. He was going to be a cardinal in the church until his older brother Arthur died. Like his entire education was around being a priest, and then eventually being a cardinal. And so yeah, that was very common. And it is important, if you're not going to inherit this farm, then it definitely needs something else and some other way they can earn a living and support a family. And then, of course, they also created their own families. We have multiple accounts of blood siblings in the UTC Saga, which that particular saga actually influenced my own kindred oath, parts of that. But I love this. And then if you think about it, I'm going to read this, and then I want to talk about the symbolism in this, right? And I don't pronounce things well, guys. Sorry.
That's okay.
They went out to the Outervale Point and cut a strip of turf, Yardaman, literally an earth necklace from the earth, so that both ends were attached to the earth, and they set an inlaid spear underneath, so a Kurtian could reach his hand up to the nail that fastened the spearhead to the shaft. The four of them had to go underneath Thorgrim, Gisi, Thorkel, and Vestine. And now they made themselves bleed and let their blood flow together into the earth that was dug from under the turf strip. And they stirred the soil and the blood all together. Then they all fell to their knees and swore to oath each to avenge the other like his own brother, and they named all the gods as their witness. By the way, we don't do the blood part. There's some other text in there that I took from there's some other like text further down I took for ours. We don't cut strips from the earth and bleed or anything. I'm not that crazy. Yet. But so as someone who is like, I like symbolism, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is the earth, right? What do when we dig up the earth and you think about blood and earth, they're essentially creating their own ancestral mound doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By the mixing of their blood, creating this mound shape, this strip of earth, they're mixing their blood together under this mound. They are creating their own barrow, their own ancestral mound.
They are. Well, and they're creating their own ancestral connection to the land, too, because they're doing it, all four of them together, and they're doing the land. And so not only are they swearing to each other, but they're swearing to each other to that place, right? That family's in that place, all four of us, and whatever else we bring to this. Yeah.
I suppose it would also call any local spirits of the land to serve as witnesses. Mm-hmm. And possibly even as guarantors that the oath is kept.
Yeah.
So in the Foster Brothers saga, they do something very similar, only they had 3 turf strips and you had to go through them. Like actually do the same thing, except in theirs, they actually go through them. So John Linlow, the reason and by the way, if you haven't read Murder and Vengeance Among the Gods,
it's really good.
Excellent.
Yes.
Really good. Talks about that this ritual creates like a mini cosmos with a spear analogous to the world tree. The turf is like this inverted sky, mingling the blood with the earth, makes these buried ancestors whose blood becomes part of the earth. Passing beneath the turf arch is a new birth. Bloody as an actual birth is bloody. So I hope from all of this that I've pulled out, I don't know. I hope the takeaway is there was no one way to family in pre-Christian Germanic cultures. There was no one way to family.
It kind of harkens back to the old saying, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. And that saying applies very literally to what you just described. So, I mean, I guess that saying is not all hooey.
No. So, Piper,
yes,
ma'am. Talk about modern family stuff.
Okay.
Because I know this week, we kind of have a little chat going where those of us who are kind of rotating hosts here kind of talk about the different topics. And I know that like the modern family stuff was something that was really important to you. So I kind of want to pass the ball to you.
Okay.
Because I'm the nerd. I do the history. I'm the nerd, and then I will pass the ball to you, Piper, because you're much more you're better with emotions than I am.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about family of origin because, and this happens in our kindred a lot, okay? Because our kindred is made of queer people, of people on LGBTQIA two-spirit. Most of us have already had a break with our family of origin because of our queerness, right? That especially those of us that are ex-evangelicals, which I am one of, and we have a couple people in the group that are as well. That makes ancestor work very, very difficult. In fact, I've been a practicing, Norse pagan for 35 years now, and I didn't start working with ancestor stuff till my grandmother died about 5 years ago, because it's so yucky and painful. Okay. And we as heathens don't really know what to do with that, right? At least in my experience. Your mileage may vary, but when you come to a ritual, especially when it's around Winter's Night or Yule, or those rituals that are important for people with kiddos, like Ostara, and people ask you, who are you, who you're related to? And to be clear, our sagas are full of genealogy. This is who's related to who, right? And that gets to be a very painful question. And it gets to be, how do we support our members in that space that have been rejected by their family and don't know how to connect to their ancestors over this sort of clump of people that don't approve of them? And, one of the ways is to just realize that grief is love with nowhere to go. So if you are grieving that sort of family of origin rejection, if you are trying to cope with that, if you're trying to reconnect with your ancestors over that, remember that you can find some place to put that love. Okay? You can put that love into blended families, which is, usually you marry someone else. Hopefully they're heathen as well. But not always. My adults, other parent was
okay if your spouse, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay if your spouse isn't heathen.
Yeah. Yes.
Store-bought will work.
Yeah, store-bought will work just fine. But probably, at least for queer people, where we start is chosen family. We look for people that will support us and love us through all of our imperfections, right? We honestly say in my kindred, perfection is neither desired nor required. We say that every time we're together, because we've all been raised and we're all sort of feeling this pain about it. So the idea that we can choose the people we want to be with, it's very important. And mixed faith families, yes.
I will say perfection is the opposite of progress.
Yes.
And that's what my therapist always says. So that's what I'm definitely there with you on that. And I think that I will say something I like to tell people when I'm working with new people who struggle with this is, in 10 generations, you have 1,022 ancestors.
Yes.
And I promise you, not all of them suck.
Right.
Most of them probably, but I mean, if you're like me, probably most of them. But
I mean, statistically, one or two of them have got to be okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, totally. Another chosen family we look at in Mountain Raven Kindred is the difference between forerunners and prototypes. There are people that went before us that laid down their reputations and sometimes their lives for our values, right? For values that are important to us. So we list them amongst our ancestors. When we sing around Winter's Night, we have a whole sing where we sing the names of the people that have passed in the last year and the people that are important to us to remember in this year, right? And that is, we have Bell Hooks is on that list, right? Right. Andre Lorde is on that list. You know, queer thinkers, queer philosophers, they're all on that list, right? Are we biologically related to them? No. But they made our experience so much easier. They went before us. They broke the trail for us. So that's something we try to keep in mind. Yeah.
And the truth, that's something that we honor heathen ancestors. These are not ancestors of blood, but these are ancestors, people who are in our organization, people who've made major accomplishments in our organization. I guess next year we'll be able to start in general, and we'll kind of get a little more when we talk about ancestral work a little bit later. But in general, the rule that I follow and that the Troth kind of has done, because many groups follow it, so we just kind of hold on to it, is that we do wait a year before that, after that person has passed, to start honoring them, to give them time to settle into their new reality,
into their new space. Yeah,
right. But for instance, Feldhoff, Gunderson. Next year, I guess at Trothmoot, we'll be able to start honoring him because it'll have been a year since he passed at Trothmoot. Rod Landreth, you want to talk about a queer heathen ancestor right there.
Right there. Yep.
Right
he
there.
Got sung this year. His name got sung this year. Yeah.
And you guys know he's my, about calling someone brother. That's that was when I was a wee baby heathen and did not know anything. He was the one leading me. Yeah. And we call him our kindred brother from another mother. Right. He's another one that if his name doesn't get honored in Symbol, I do it because, someone in my kindred is going to raise his name up in Symbol. We have so many people that we do honor and that's the thing when I teach a lot of new people, and when I am teaching, one of the things I remind them is ancestors don't have to be blood, and family doesn't have to be blood. I have my own, I am also ex-evangelical, except I am independent fundamentalist Baptist. Mm-hmm. So I am my family went hardcore. I'm still having trauma from that Duggar special that came out.
Same. Oh my gosh, that was awful. Anyway,
we'll have to talk about that. Oh my god. No, what was trauma was seeing how many people I knew.
Yeah, I can see that.
I knew. Yeah, that was
way too many people.
I'm here where they are.
Where they are.
But anyway, the thing is how do I, as a, you're looking at that, your families of choice. I mean, my family relationships are difficult because my parents are still very religious. I am very religious, but very not their religious. As it says in my bio on the Troth website, my family always thought I would grow up to be a religious leader. They just didn't think it would be like this.
Right.
And and then my and so it can be hard. And, my brother's an atheist. He and I disagree on so much, although he's mellowed in his age. So it can be very hard. It can be very difficult to keep that going. And, especially when your family doesn't accept you. And I will say, someone you've been in Heathenry for a long time as well. Mm-hmm. Forever, there was that huge push about Frith and your family and all the Groenbeck people, and oh my god, I was one of them, so I can't say much.
Sure.
I got sucked into that, I'll admit it.
That was a heartbreaking period for me, actually.
That was the end all be all.
Yeah, the family was the end all be all, and that was horrible for every queer heathen I knew. It was painful. It was brutal. Because
I will say, my thought was,
go ahead.
Family was an end all be all, but I always push for, if your family isn't safe for you, it's better to be safe than have to deal with that. Yeah. And I think that's the huge thing, is that it has to be safe for you. Yeah. And creating your own family. My kindred, we're a family. We've been together 20 years at this point. Yeah. We're a family.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we fight like siblings sometimes, but we are a family. And I think that that is important. And I think chosen families are super important. It's through the Troth that I have built a chosen family that kind of exists beyond my kindred. As far as, people that I'm incredibly close to, like Mary Antonelli, who's our corporate treasurer, she and I are incredibly close because of this organization, but it has grown beyond that into a very close friendship. And I do think, I do want to touch some on the grief here when we talk about ancestral work, but I want to talk about mixed faith families for a minute, because that, first of all, that is like one of the things I see pop up all the time in more open pagan heathen spheres, like Reddit and that type.
Yeah.
I am in a mixed faith marriage. My husband is an atheist. And going into this, he knew my faith was very important to me. My first marriage was with a heathen man. And just because you marry a heathen does not mean it's going to turn out good. My first husband was an alcoholic. He was very abusive. So marrying another heathen is not an insulation against something bad happening. But my husband, while he, I think that you have to set those things out before you ever get into even a serious relationship. You have to work those things out.
I told my wife immediately. My wife is what she calls a militant agnostic, right? Like, I don't know, and neither do you. However, we've been together now for like 15 years, and she's seen some stuff, and we've done some stuff, and now she's, she's still not sure it's all, real, for some value of real, but that, her family are very devout Lutherans, and they have been incredibly accepting of my belief system, because I didn't walk in all prickly and you're all Christians and you're all evil, and you're oppressing me and all of that stuff, because I don't personally believe that stuff, but at least not from these kinds of people, to be clear. And they've been incredibly sweet about. My sister-in-law will lean over and say, "Have a lovely whatever holiday you're having right now."
So I take it they are ECLA and not Missouri Synod.
Right. But yeah, so they are the sweetest people. And that's not true for my birth family, but it is true for my in-laws, which I appreciate very much.
My mother-in-law, who is about to move in with us, I love her. My mother-in-law is not, I would call her nominally Christian, right? Like, she doesn't go to church. She's not super religious, but I call her nominally Christian. And she listens to every episode of Heathen History. She would probably watch every episode of this if I told her it existed. She's so supportive. Also, she's Piper's twin sister. Well, these days I'm going to get them on a video call together so they can freak out.
I go, oh my gosh.
My husband, I was on a video call with Piper one time, and my husband goes, "Why are you talking to my mom?" It was the funniest thing.
That's amazing.
The only difference is the accent, because my mother-in-law is from West Virginia. But other than that, it's like,
so why is my mom talking like that to you?
Yeah, I know. Well, I had headphones on, so he couldn't hear Piper.
Okay. Well, that would have been hilarious.
But she's so supportive and just so happy. And like, that's the thing. Like, I think if we give most people who aren't on the far flung sides of fundamentalism, because let's be honest here, it's not a Christian issue. It's not a whatever issue. It's a fundamentalism issue.
It is.
But if you give most people a chance, they're pretty cool. I mean, I work with tons of Christians doing interfaith work, and have never had a bad experience outside of fundamentalists. But most of the interfaith work I do doesn't lend itself to a lot of those people, so it doesn't really, not a lot of them out doing, restorative justice protests and, working with queer people and that kind of stuff. So, I think that's the thing. Most people, I think, will surprise you, but at the same time, I see this discussion a lot. I think, for me, you're talking about your spouse, your wife's a militant agnostic. My husband's an apathist.
Oh, okay.
He just doesn't care. Just doesn't care.
Right.
My husband's gods are D&D. If it doesn't have dice, he doesn't worship it. It's just. And I met him at his church, the game store. So
I know someone of that faith.
Yes.
I know how it can be.
But I do think you have to have these very difficult conversations early on.
Yes. That should be like a first, second date conversation. Depending on how you judge people,
Yeah.
that should be really early.
Yeah. Or at least, like, for me, even if I were single and looking for a partner to live with, which I would never do again because I'm done. If this is never living with anybody else. Sorry, it's just I'm too set in my ways. I'm too set in my ways at this point. I would look at looking at my experiences and everything. I would be very upfront and say, "Listen, this is who I am. This is a big part of my life. If this isn't going to work for you, cool. But and there's a few reasons. One, there have been a lot of mostly men I have seen leave heathenry for a woman.
Yes.
And then when that woman breaks up with them, they come back. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of one very specific person in mind, but there's 2 or 3 others. Yeah. Some of them have been big name heathens who have done this. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a huge conversation you've got to have. I think you've also got to have the conversation about how you're going to raise kids if you want to have kids. What faith are they going to be raised in? Because I see all these people come in and they've either been hiding their faith from their spouse or they're usually a Christian spouse because we live in a predominantly Christian country. And it hurts my heart a lot. Like, you have to be, be open, find compromise, because if you're an interfaith, most of us are going to be in interfaith families at least.
Yes.
Like for me, while I don't get anything out of celebrating Christmas, I do it because it's a time that I am together. That's one of the few times my entire family is together because my brother lives so far away. I would much rather just celebrate Yule and just celebrate my holidays, but my husband also, Christmas is important to him, so we celebrate Christmas. Stuff like that you have to figure out. And I will say, I'm gonna hear, if you're in a mixed faith family, Unitarians, I'm just saying.
And that's where I do a lot of actually my interfaith work is with Unitarians. And if Unitarians are like the bridge faith for progressive people, right? You're an atheist, they don't care. As long as you will agree to whatever the covenant is for that congregation, mm-hmm. They don't really care what your faith is. What they care about is what you're practicing in the world, whether you're in that space or outside, right?
And that's very heathen.
Yeah, it is very heathen. And that's why I work with them so closely, because they are definitely people. We are our deeds. They're the people that are out there protesting. They're the people that are out there doing anti-racism work, anti-bigotry work in general. They're the people that are here in Colorado. I am part of a group through that Unitarian church that I work with, who, because we have a lot of trans people that are coming to Colorado because it's an asylum state. And we're helping them get settled. We're helping them make sure, they have friends, they have stuff to do, that they know people, and I'm part of that group. So yeah, Unitarians are fantastic for people that really care about what you're doing, not what you believe, what you're doing. So
I have to tell you my one good Unitarian joke.
Yeah.
Why can't Unitarians sing?
Why?
Because they're always reading ahead to make sure they agree with the words.
It's funny because it's true.
Yeah, I gave a talk at the UU church to go and opened it with that, and it killed.
Yeah, oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, and the Unitarians also have a lot of really great programs that are with religious literacy. I think we've had them contact us and come to some of our stuff before with the kids, like the young. I would say
Neighboring Faiths is 6th grade, and that's the class that I teach. And
excellent.
And we do all the faiths. We do Buddhism, we do Hinduism, we do Earth-Based Space. We just finished Earth-Based Space. They let me write the whole thing. It was awesome. They do all kinds of other things, but they take the kids to the places of worship, and they get to see how people interact with their deities of choice, right? Whether it's Hindus or Buddhists or Christians, Protestant. I think we're going to a historic black church here in Colorado.
Oh, awesome.
I mean, yeah. So they do have programs for your kiddos to learn all that stuff as well. It's fantastic.
Yeah, here they go to Second Baptist Church because it was had the first integrated school in the state of Arkansas.
Oh, cool.
Arkansas shut down the schools in Little Rock when they tried to integrate them the first year, and so Second Baptist Church opened up a high school.
Aha.
Nice. There's actually a really cool documentary about it. I found out about oddly enough when you and I were and the three of us were at Parliament.
Oh, okay.
That Good News Media that was like right across from us.
Yeah,
they did that. It was really
that's
cool.
But
yeah, I think it's really, and that's the thing. Like, there's so many avenues that if you're in a mixed faith relationship, there's so many really great avenues that you can absolutely explore with kids. I know Jesse and I, my husband and I, when we were talking about it, like if we had kids, we were going to raise them Unitarian because to us, it was teaching them how to be good people. They're sex positive. Like
they are really sex positive. Yeah. Which I appreciate as a queer person, because there's not that sort of, abstinence only and all that other stuff that you've heard about girls kissing girls. No, that doesn't exist. It's not normal Sunday school. Yeah.
Yeah. Our sex ed in my high school was so bad. I was somehow both a lesbian and pregnant.
Oh,
the rumor mill.
Nice. Bad women's anatomy. And very nice.
Yeah. I was really confused by that one.
I bet.
But I think that, mixed faith families can work if there's a lot of respect. I think that's the thing is you have to have respect. You have to have love and respect and a desire, like I said, my husband is not heathen, but he supports everything I do. He's, he is incredibly supportive of all this. If I need him to come hold a camera and film me doing something, he'll do it. He goes to events with me occasionally, not as so much anymore, because we've got 3 dogs and they kind of demand a lot of attention. But I mean, he's traveled with me. He's going to go with me to, speaking of which, he's going with me to Firth Forge next year.
Awesome.
Because it's also our 10-year anniversary, so we figured we'd make a trip of it. Yeah. So we figured we'd just make a trip to Costa Rica out of it. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's very hard, and especially having grown up in a family where there was only one way to do things, and a very strict religious thing. There's a lot of freedom, I think, sometimes in having a mixed faith family, and a lot of good things, because as I can imagine a child growing up in that environment has a lot of freedom to say, I'm allowed the autonomy to make choices about my faith. Mm-hmm. I'm not being forced, granted, kids are going to be forced to go to some things just by the nature of their children. They can't be left home alone lest they burn the place down. But
because they're always trying to kill themselves. When I first started out in heathenry, it was, and paganism in general, There was, and this was a trauma-based response as a community that we did. And it's something that I'd like to actually repair and change. But at the time, most of us were determined never to raise our kid in any faith at all, because we, especially those of us that had come out of evangelical circles, had been so oppressed by religion. The problem with that becomes when we have second and third generation kiddos that, like Ben last week told us this great story that he tells his kiddo about winter, Thorablot, right? I mean, it's beautiful. It's one of those things I'd love to just write down and illustrate and have as a kid's book for our kiddos. We get a lot of questions about what material do we have for kids, and we don't have that much. And a lot of that is in reaction to that we will not convert our kids like our parents converted us. We will not treat our children the way our parents treated us. And that's okay. But now we have all these parents going, but I want to read to my kiddos about Thor. Right?
I think that what we have to do is, because I think the part of the problem is I think as a religion, as I have said, and I've said before, we're growing up.
Yes.
We
are growing up.
We're still in our late adolescent period as a religion. And as a result, I think that we're going to really have to reckon with that. And that's something I know the Troth is working on. We did put out a activity book.
Oh, yeah.
There's some other things in the pipe working on right now. But it's the problem with children's books a lot of times is they're expensive.
Yes. If you don't have artists in house.
Yeah. And that's so that is something I will say, though, if you do want, there is a organization, there's a series of books called Norse, of course.
Yes.
That I always recommend. They're not necessarily heathen, but they are Norse mythology. And as a kid, I was addicted to books on tape, like the little ones, like the read-along books.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And they're those, except they're YouTube videos that are animated, and you can read along.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.
I bought the whole set of them for Aaron when he was little.
Oh, cool.
And so, but I do think that's something we have to reckon with. But I also think as a heathen, and while I'm not a parent, I'm a godparent. And I think a lot about this because my kindred's full of kids. Because we're old and we're queer and we have kids.
Yes.
And I think a lot about this, and I think about passing on your values and passing on information without passing on the expectation that you must do this because there's no mandate to convert. So to me, I feel like you can raise your child around your religion, raise your child with your religion, but not necessarily raise your child in a way that you're forcing your religion on them.
Right.
And if at some point the kid's like, I'm not interested, then
they're not interested. And you go, okay, cool. What are you interested in? What'd you like to do? Yeah. I mean,
no, honey, Minecraft is not a religion yet.
Well, I don't know if D&D is a religion. I don't know.
There's a really great YouTuber on here called Strange Eons. And she has a whole video arguing that the whole early 2000s women who all claimed to be married to Severus Snape on the astral plane actually qualified as a religion. It's a great video. Long form.
Wow. Okay.
But it meets every criteria.
Sure, it does.
Yeah. Great. But I will say it's a, okay, and that's the thing, you give your kids the values and the tools, and then you accept that they're their own people.
Yep. At some point, your story stops being their story.
Exactly. And if it's not, then you might be a narcissist. Get some help.
Yeah. Please get some help.
So with all these difficult families, I do want to talk a bit about ancestral work, especially about how I'm going to shift this slightly because my approach to ancestral work comes from recovery spaces. I'm very open
okay.
with I'm 20 years sober. And still struggle, though I do have struggle with mental health issues. I try to be very open and vulnerable about that with people because I want to demystify and kind of destigmatize having serious mental health issues and having issues like autism. So one of the things that we know scientifically is that stress and trauma actually affect us on what's called an epigenetic level. What does that mean? Epigenetic means not your actual genetic, like DNA makeup, but how those genes express themselves. So the stress that your parents were under, all the things that happened to their bodies from trauma, stress, abuse, whatever their family circumstances are, that travels to you and how your genes are expressed. So you end up with similar tendencies for stress, anxiety, psycho-emotional issues, in addition to just learning all of their bad coping skills because you learn what you see.
Yeah.
And so the problem, you're looking at generational trauma. And there's many ways that we see generational trauma, especially in the West, unfold. You have people who have generational trauma due to things like high control religious groups that family has been a part of for generations. You have people who experience generational trauma due to race, due to ethnicity. You have people who experience generational trauma due to addiction, cycles of addiction that last, or abuse for years and years and generations. In my family, that is, in fact, the case until my grandparents. We had extreme generational alcoholism in my family. But it's really funny now that I've been in therapy to sit down and figure out just how much I'm like my grandmother and how I respond to stress, how I respond to my anxiety. And so to me, these, from a scientific perspective, this is important, right? Because this is on a very most tiniest level of our building blocks of our bodies, what has happened in the past is affecting us. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not talking about the wild theories of a madman that somehow our religion is coded into our genetics. That's some bull. I'm talking about actual scientific stuff.
Right. Well, and one of the populations they studied for this particular science, kind of sciencing, as my wife would say, is Holocaust survivors.
Yes.
Because you're talking about, and it is very much. And also, we as a culture have, on cultural levels, have been having stress and trauma. World War II to Korea to Vietnam. You have all of these men that come home to try to make families that are busted by PTSD. And because my mother tells this story when we still talked. I've no contact with my parents, by the way. That is a choice. It's my choice. I live with that choice. But my Aunt June is 6 years older than she was, and their father went to war the year my mother was born. My grandfather went to war. And my Aunt June says my grandfather was a lovely, gentle, poetic man. My mother remembers him 6 years later after World War II as an abusive, violent, frightening alcoholic. Okay. And we had 10% of the male population that returned that came back with that. Right. So we have cultural trauma as well as genetic trauma, as well as, and we're dealing with that now. We're dealing with the ramifications of that now.
We're seeing a whole generation of Vietnam veterans retiring,
yes.
And all of a sudden their PTSD is coming.
Yes.
My one of my mother's close friends, her husband, like, got back from Vietnam, immediately got a job, started a family, did all of those things, right? Retired after working 30 years. And that's when the terror started. That's when all the PTSD symptoms started, because he slowed down enough to finally experience it.
Yep.
So we're seeing this generation also that are starting to experience it. I hate to, it's going to sound terrible, but I'm glad they're experiencing it now and not then.
Yeah.
Because now at least we understand what it is. We're treating it better. But I think we also have, I mean, people my age and younger, like Jay, you're younger than I am. You've basically gone through, in your young, the young formative part of your lifetime was September 11th, the economic crash in 2008, now COVID. I mean, it's...
Oh, yeah, for sure. Life for you guys sucks.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
So I think that one of these things that we have to think about, if you are like, when it comes to this ancestral work, is, yes, there's a huge part in Heathenry about honoring your ancestors, connecting to these ancestral spirits. But there's also that part of unworking this trauma for your benefit and being a good ancestor by unworking this trauma. And that's what I'm trying to do, is unwork trauma. Unfortunately, I cannot recommend a good book to you, because the good book I had, the author turned out to be an absolute creeper. Okay. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
As as it happens, unfortunately. But one of the things with working with ancestral trauma is you can deal with family unresolved stories, secrets, resentments, and other things that were never healed. And one of the places I started with that in my own working was my grandmother. My grandmother passed away about 10 years ago. And before she died, she had pretty severe dementia. And she had the specific type of dementia she had, I don't remember which one it was. She would re-experience life at a different age. So, for instance, she thought she was a kid sometimes. She thought she was a young mother sometimes. And through that, I discovered that she had been abused as a child. So one of the very first ancestral traumas I tried to, I guess, unwork, and I'm still trying to unwork because it's very complicated, is that letting go of that and that healing that essay that happened to or whatever that abuse was. It sounded like that from what she said, right? Like, I can't say for sure. But I mean, there's other things, my great grandmother, another one that I have here, her daughter died in the time before we really understood RH negative RH factors in blood. And so there's a trauma there with, the death of her child. I mean, there's ancestral traumas, in my family of people who were conscripted out of the hills, essentially, because we are Ozark people, to force them to fight for the Confederates when they didn't want to. That's a trauma, being conscripted and forced to fight. Vietnam showed us nothing. That's a huge trauma. Yeah. But it is a way, to me, it heals. If you ever have looked at like a blanket or a tapestry that has like a little run in it or a fray, and it's still a perfectly serviceable blanket, but that spot's weaker. It's not as warm. And to me, what I am doing is getting one of those nice little reweaving tools that you can buy. And I'm essentially going in and trying to reweave those spots in the weird, the tapestry of my weird, so that they're stronger. And some of them are my family trauma. Some of them are some of them are my own, I'm still working through my own traumas sometimes. There are times that I think I have gotten past things that have happened in my life with my, I'm a victim of clergy sexual abuse. And there are times when I think I've gotten past that. And then something like that happy, shiny people pops up. And I'm like, well, crap.
Yeah.
And so you rework that. And to me, even if your immediate ancestors really suck, and they can, my immediate ancestors all pretty much sucked. It helps you also understand that they're people.
Yes.
And the reason they suck is probably because someone else sucked to them. And that person who sucked. Yeah.
It's that hurt people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, because if you don't resolve the trauma, it just moves on to the next generation. You're just kicking the can down the road. And a problem with kicking the can down the road is that you're traumatizing your descendants. We're supposed to be building a better world for our descendants.
I think I once heard somebody phrase it that, like, if you don't heal your traumas, you'll bleed on people who didn't cut you.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. I might be mixing up like a word or
no, that's good.
There, but
no, that's perfect.
It's definitely there.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like, it kind of reminds me of like what they say about resentment. Like, all your resentment is being mad at someone else, but somehow but hitting yourself for it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important to look at. And so, and I will say, in as much as it can be very hard for me to deal with my own family, I'm not no contact, but I'm definitely on my own terms contact. I think that's the best way to put it. But I will say, working through some of these traumas, seeing and learning what I know has definitely helped me see the problematic people in my life in a better way. Like, not when I say better, I don't necessarily mean in a kinder way. It doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps me not be hurt by what they're doing.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's the approach that I've taken as well. I'm not as far along at it. I still have some issues with it, but that is very definitely they are people too, and their lives were screwed up also, and they never had the tools to fix it.
Exactly.
Oh.
And I think that's something to, I think about, what would my grandmother have been like had my grandmother had access to therapy and medication like I do?
Yeah. Seriously. Yes. Same.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we have to look at and be very cognizant with ourselves and the other thing is just being gentle with yourself, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to ancestral work, it's hard, but it's not going to happen in a day. Your family didn't mess itself up in a day. This is not something that's going to be fixed in a weekend, contrary to what people are trying to sell you.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is important to think about and to work on, because the other part of it is finding those beautiful ancestral spirits you didn't necessarily know about, who come to you when you try to do when you start doing this heavy ancestral work and start being that support. And then you find these beautiful spirits that you can build these wonderful connections to, and that becomes someone I can these ancestral spirits I can sit down and have a cup of coffee with and love and
thank. We can be grateful.
Yes.
Instead of mad. Right?
Like I'll be honest with you, all of these people I knew growing up whose mom was their best friend, it confused me so much.
Same. What? Okay, I guess. Crazy person? Yeah. But yeah.
But in the meantime, if all else fails, I suggest going on Amazon, ordering a copy of our Troth and taking it with you. It's enough to read for the entirety of Thanksgiving. You'll be fine.
Yes. Well, okay. So those conversations that you have with your family about what you believe, okay, and those are hard conversations to have, and I've had them at various points with various family members. I didn't get successful until I started to ask myself, what are you afraid of? And what are they afraid of? And why do you have to stay afraid? Right? You don't necessarily have to be scared in that moment. Do they believe the same way you do? Probably not. Do you have to put up with their, particular, if they're being bigoted, do you have to put up with that? No, not at all. You can ask them to leave. You can leave. You can do any of those things. That this is not family to the degree that everything they say is the truth, because that's just crazy. You'll make yourself crazy with that one. But if you're talking about football, which is very popular in Colorado, or something else on the couch, and nothing bad's really happened, and don't pick a fight. Just watch the football. Watch the sports ball game.
I honestly go in with and that's the thing, like, I go in with a plan every time. And part of that plan is I bring something to keep my hands busy, because if I try to bring like a fidget or something, I know my mom's going to say something, right? So I bring some sort of needlework or knitting or something to keep my hands busy. So I can stim if I get overwhelmed. Like, I meticulously plan. I plan things to talk about and ways to change the subject. And I also practice, there's this great technique. If you have to deal with family who can be problematic, especially if they want to try to start fights, let me introduce you to being a gray rock, where you sit there and be as interesting as a gray rock. And you don't say anything. You don't fight with them. You don't let them pick a fight. You just sit there. Be quiet. And you just sit there. And it's really hard to fight when someone doesn't fight back.
Also, when you're in that space, just sitting there, say hello to the spirits of place.
Yeah.
Say hi. I'm here.
Exactly.
Hi, how you doing? Oh, you're much more interesting than whatever's going on right here.
Be the person who volunteers to take the dogs for a walk.
Yep.
Get to know the land spirits.
Yep. Do those things that will feed your soul or your spirit while you're there, so that you're not angry.
No.
So that, and if they're being really awful, just leave.
Yeah. Or if you can't just leave, go take a nap.
Go take a nap. Yeah. That's really effective.
Yeah. The other thing I often do is keep myself like really busy. Like, I cook, I do stuff, right? Like, if my dad always has projects for me, I'm going to help him with some stuff in his shop while we're there. I try to stay busy, right? Because staying busy is another really great way to, like I said, because that's the thing. I do feel like very often people use these occasions when we're with family, especially family we don't disagree with, to try to start a fight.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So important safety tip. Do not come out to come out of the broom closet to your family over the holidays. Don't do it. Just don't. If you want,
there's nothing wrong with never coming out to your family about your religion or your sexuality if it's not safe.
Right. And I didn't get that choice. And if I had, I probably would have stayed in both the closet and the broom closet for at least a little bit longer, but I didn't have that choice. However, if you want your family to understand who you are and what you do, show them.
Yes.
Don't tell them I'm a heathen and bang a thing on the table and say, whatever. Do the dishes. Pick up stuff. Take the dogs out. Whatever. Help.
Be a good guest.
Be a good guest.
That's a big part of our faith. Be a good guest.
Yes. Yes.
And that's huge. And I think that's super important as be a good guest. So I always tell people, what is the best way to tell someone I'm heathen, or I'm like, be heathen? Or
Yes.
when people talk about what's the best way, the answer to so many things is be heathen. Like,
Yes.
and when I say be heathen, I mean be heathen.
Yes.
Not just wander around with your proud heathen shirt and not actually do anything. I mean, live your faith loudly without saying a word.
Yeah.
One of the best compliments I got from one of my elderly family members was what a great Christian I was. Now, here's the thing though, like, they meant it as such a sweet, sincere compliment that I took it as that.
Yeah.
Right.
Because what they were trying to say was, what is a kind, sweet, wonderful person I was.
Yes. I'm sorry, what did you say, Jay?
Oh, no, you just take the compliment for the spirit of it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that is sweet, though.
And, like, it's like the whole happy holidays, Merry Christmas thing. Like, if someone says Merry Christmas to me, I will say happy holidays back to them. I don't care that much. People used to get mad. I used to work in a call center. People used to get mad because I said happy holidays. And I'm like, I'm in a call center. I'm not sure exactly what day it is or the date.
Right.
I don't see sunlight. I say happy holidays because I'm not entirely sure when we are right now. And the guy laughed and I defused it and it was fine.
Yeah. Awesome.
And he understood when I said, listen, it's like being in a casino. I don't know when we are. I don't know what's going on. All I know is that I'm saying it so that because I don't know where we are.
Right.
Vaguely aware it's on Earth somewhere.
Yeah, maybe.
It's sometime between 12 and 11:59. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is you go in, you do your thing, and try your hardest to be a good, try your hardest, and that's all you can do. And if your family still wants to act up, well, you tried.
Yes. And again, perfection is neither required nor desired. You get mad, lose your temper, walk out. It happens, right? Those can be used as opportunities to build bridges.
And sometimes that might be the wake-up call the other person needed.
Yes. And sometimes that might be the wake-up call that other person needed. Because maybe no one had told them before that they were a racist jerk or a anti-trans turf or whatever, right? Although in this year of 2023, probably someone has said something to them.
I don't know I would disagree because a lot of people live in such echo chambers now.
That's true. There's not a lot of people trying to see as much of the weave as they can.
I mean, if you're only exposed to Fox News or worse or whatever your weapon of choice is, then yeah, you may be, it's kind of like, for my parents always want to pull out like the craziest Fox News story there is.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Last year it was litter boxes in schools.
Yeah, it's actually supposed to be a school here in Colorado for furries. Yeah, it didn't happen. I mean, there was litter in the school for like for like ice and shit, right? For like putting behind cars so they don't get stuck. It wasn't for cat boxes in classrooms.
Yeah, I looked at my mom and said, "You were a teacher. Do you think that could happen?" I said, "Mom, what did the janitor keep litter for when we were cat litter for when you were a teacher? When kids puked in the hall?"
Yeah.
And I just stared at her and blinked.
Oh, very nice.
Because sometimes not saying anything is the best thing you can say.
That's very true.
And I think that's the thing you have to eventually acknowledge is it's not worth it sometimes. And that's the older I get, there's been a lot of things going on in my life. I'm not going to talk about on here, but I was having a conversation with a couple of our board members. With Ben KG and then Carl Bumbright, our associate president. And I said, I refuse to let fill in the blank, this thing going on, rob me of my mental health anymore. And that's the other thing. Like, you can go in and say, I refuse to let this person, this situation, rob me of my sanity, my joy, my mental health.
Yeah.
And that's what I do before I go visit my families. I say, I refuse to let my mother, my father, my brother, whoever, rob me of my joy, rob me of my mental health.
Yeah.
And that's something my therapist taught me. And that's a good intention when you're going into a fraught situation. Sometimes I have to do that with other people in my life. But I do think that that's a really important thing, is to say, I refuse to allow this person to rob me of what things are important to you. What are they causing in your life? And I think setting that intention is a good boundary. Boundaries, healthy boundaries are also super important.
Yes.
And I'm terrible at boundaries. So,
we are specifically, if you're an ex-evangelical, you have been specifically raised not to have boundaries. So unless someone teaches you at some point what boundaries are and how they work, you're going to be bad at it forever. And, that's one of the things Heathenry does well, is teach boundaries. Right?
As a society, we're bad at it because think about how much people in this world like to brag, for instance, how many hours they've worked. Like, it's a badge of honor that you've put in. Like, I was complaining the other day, like, oh God, I had to work 3 13-hour days this week. And it had nothing. I wasn't bragging. I was like, oh God, will the server upgrades please stop? Like, but that's a very rare thing for me. That was a very specific, we had to do server upgrades. It had to get done before Thanksgiving kind of, normally it wouldn't happen like that. Right.
Right.
I'm normally really hard on my boundaries with work. I do my 40 hours a week. I don't go over that unless I absolutely have to, because of boundaries. And I think that's super important for all of us to be able to, even with our family, even if it's just an emotional boundary.
Yep.
I think that's a super important thing. And Heathenry does teach boundaries. I have set a very firm boundary, for instance, in the Troth on Sunday, unless there is a specific reason. For instance, I'm out of town on Friday and Saturday. I have been sick Friday and Saturday. There's a very specific event coming up. I do no Troth work on Sundays. And Piper knows this from being around, and Jay does too. I work about 35 hours a week on Troth stuff.
Yeah.
I tend to spend all day Friday on it, most of Saturday. I come home from work every day and work on stuff. I work my lunch hour usually on Troth stuff. But after getting called out on a very strict rune rating, I have set a very strict boundary that I'm not doing, except for like our member meets, that kind of stuff. Or that's social. That's not a big deal. I'm not doing Troth work on Sundays anymore. And a big part of that was I recognized that I was getting no boundaries. I was getting no rest. My brain wasn't shutting down from constant Troth stuff. But that's important. You have to have those boundaries. You have to set, boundaries with people. Otherwise, you're going to end up. It's the gifting cycle of your emotions and time.
Yeah.
So I want to toss that out there for a minute. When we're dealing with our families, we're dealing with family of origin who can be problematic. I often look at it like the gifting cycle. Because if the gifting cycle is one-sided, it's not a gifting cycle. It's just you trying to bribe someone to please do something. Mm-hmm. And if what you give to your family, whatever that is in no way returned, or, you give your family, I'm trying to think of a good, every, the example being, every year you give your family a nice gift, and every year they give you used tissue. At what point do you stop trying to give them nice gifts? Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing, I think, with that relationship. At some point, if you're only getting back used tissues emotionally, then you have to look and set that boundary and say, okay, I'm not going to put that more out of me emotionally or mentally. I think it's with people too, not just family, and I do think that that's super important to think about, at least.
Well, especially for disabled people, I know I have to be very careful about what my priorities are and what I'm spending energy on in that space. And if it's going to be, something that I'm not getting enough out of, I'm going to stop doing it. I'm going to tell people I'm stopping doing it. Of course, I'm not going to just drop anything, but I will tell you, no, this isn't really working for me. Sorry, have a nice time. Get invited someplace to see people, and it's like, no, that's not really going to work for me. Have a nice time. It's really important to protect both your peace and your energy. So,
especially when the world we're in right now is so fraught, and you can often get it from all sides. For me, it's about protecting, and another thing for me, for instance, my phone shuts off at 10:15. I can't get messages from anyone unless you are on a very specific list of people. 10:15 at night, my phone shuts off.
Same.
And I do that for my one, so I'll go to bed and not constantly answer messages all night. And two, because once again, it's a boundary, it's disconnecting. And I think, I have a friend whose mother is losing touch with reality a little bit.
Okay.
But not to the point that you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, you've got to just set those kind of boundaries with her, because she's texting her all night, and just, I said, you just got to, set your do not disturb, and,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, as long, take care of yourself. As, they say on the airplane, you have to put your oxygen mask on first.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully take care of each other, and, find or be the weird gay aunt.
Yes, and I am the weird gay aunt. So I am the weird gay aunt. I'm the weird gay older sibling. I am the weird gay uncle. I'm the weird gay person that people ask questions of. So I want those questions to be as wise, and I screw that up. So we make it funny. So it's like, okay, it'll be fine. But those are the relationships you want to nurture, and the relationships that aren't really serving you, do what you can with them, right? If you have to let them go, let them go. If you have to restrict them, set boundaries, do that, because you're valuable, and your time and your effort and your love and your joy are all valuable. Spend them where they have value, to people they have value for.
And I just kind of want to close this out, that if you are struggling with addiction or mental health issues, you need support this time of year. I know this is, especially for people with addictions, this is a very hard time of year. We do have a program called Heathens in Recovery. You do not need to be a Troth member to join. And it is an incredible, we have weekly meetings, as well as a 9-step plan of recovery that is an independent from all other recovery programs. Like, it's not based on 12 steps or any of that kind of stuff. And it is a really great way, in my opinion, to help deal not just with mental health, but also addiction issues from, it's the spiritual component of recovery, because recovery has 3 stools, right? You have mental, you have physical, and you have spiritual. And this is the spiritual part to support your other 2. So if you are struggling, please join us. It is definitely a wonderful, wonderful group full of a lot of support. I know over the past week, I've really been struggling with a lot of stuff going on, and have reached out, and it's been a very much a comfort that group has. And the advice and the wisdom I've gotten from people has been wonderful. And so I've been incredibly grateful that they have been there to help me, because, getting doxxed sucks.
It really does. Really sucks.
And get more creative with your death threats, folks. That's all I'm going to say. I'm getting tired of them. Give me some good ones. Like,
If
these are
you're
boring.
If you're in the state of Colorado, I have a list of heathen-friendly therapists across the state that if you're having problems with addiction, or if you're having problems with your family, you're having grief issues, any of that, I have a list for that in Colorado, and there's a really great list nationwide, especially if you're a queer person. And I'll put that in the comments for this particular.
We can get it to me, and I'll get it in the show notes.
Okay, cool.
And then in Arkansas, same thing for me. Heathens in Recovery, we actually maintain a pretty decent list of heathen-friendly, queer-friendly providers.
Oh, nation. Awesome.
And I know in Arkansas, I've followed my therapist now to 3 practices, because it's very rare that you're going to find a queer-friendly, pagan-friendly therapist in Arkansas. So who also knows how to deal with religious trauma. Yeah. I hit the gold mine with mine. So.
The horrifying bingo.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Like, so I think it's super important that we, so I think it's one of the things that, there's no shame in getting help. As heathens, we get help. In fact, grief, mental health issues, all this stuff is talked about in the sagas. And one of the things I did a very short TikTok on this, but I'll throw out my knowledge on this. The approach to mental health issues and addiction was very community focused. It was very all about the community gathering and helping someone heal on those 3 levels. And they would seek out their local spiritual leader, be that a vulva or their local gothi, and they would see, family support. Like, there was community support. It wasn't, addiction and mental health should never be a battle you face alone. You're not alone. And while we can't build the same kind of like communities we had then, we definitely have those communities to support you. Mm-hmm. So please join us. We're here. And I promise you that we can help you not take that next drink, or not take, for me, that next amphetamine, not take whatever, that next self-harm. Yeah. It's possible, and it can happen. So just to let you guys know, this time of year, if you need it, we are here, and we're happy to help. And you can always reach out to me, president@thetroth.org, if you don't feel comfortable. If you want to reach out to me and just talk, I am happy to talk to anybody who's struggling with addiction and mental health right now, because I understand. It's been a lifetime. Mental health's been a lifelong struggle for me. So I understand, and we're here. This is a hard time of year. Yeah. For all of us. I think even if you come from like a stereotypically good family, it's still hard. Yeah. Because there's still, we've all lost loved ones in the past few years. There's still so much loss and stress. It still can be hard. So, yeah. Well, any final thoughts, you guys?
Thank you. Yeah, if anyone has questions, you can always hit one. I can also be hit up at Colorado at costewart@thetroth.org or public relations at thetroth.org, depending on which hat I'm wearing.
Yeah. Or if you go to the contact us form on the website, that goes to Piper.
That goes to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really do appreciate a lot of your questions and what you're asking, because that's part of building community, is building relationships.
Yes, it is.
So thank you for all of the questions that you send me.
I used to be you, so I understand. Their questions are great because sometimes they're amazing, and sometimes you're going, I don't know what they're asking.
I've had a couple of those where I was like, oh, okay, I should ask someone else because I don't know.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, like the manifesto we got at Troth Booth this year.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Oh, that was crazy. And I mean that in a
talk about
non-ableist sort of way.
Yeah, no, there's not
No,
enough
I mean that in like, I'm genuinely concerned for this man's welfare.
Yes, I'm genuinely concerned for this man's health. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Hopefully he's not taking up a career in writing.
Well, if he is, he
did
needs a
have
better
great
editor.
Yeah, no, it was extremely legible. I will give that.
Like, okay, we got like what 300-page like manifesto about. I never could quite figure out what he wanted, other than like
I don't know that he did
God
that.
and Odin and Thor were. I never could figure out quite what it was. Other than the fact that he only wanted men to come to his meeting.
Yes.
Wasn't he also trying to declare war on science?
Yes, he was trying to declare war on science.
Yes.
That was a real statement.
That was a real statement. Yeah.
He was trying to declare war on science. But the man had like textbook, immaculate. Everything was handwritten.
His handwriting was gorgeous.
Like
this guy was like a professor.
Yeah.
For those of us who are older, it looked like that strip that used to be above the blackboard.
Yes.
It was perfect penmanship.
Yeah.
Gave me a little bit of anxiety because I had bad handwriting all through school. But yeah, that was a. Sometimes we get that stuff in the mail too, and that's fun.
That's fun.
I do enjoy that. I'm not gonna lie, I do enjoy that sometimes. But yeah, I definitely think that is important for us to think about. So we will be back next week, I believe. Yeah, next Friday night. I won't be here because I will be gone. I believe we have a pre-taped episode for next week.
Yeah, I think they're going to try to do Myth of a Violent Conversion next week.
Yeah.
But we may have to pick up, if they don't get that done, we may have to do Spiritual Discernment or one of the other ones on the list.
Yeah, we've got a whole list.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will have that. I think whatever we do will probably be a pre-tape next week though.
Yep.
Because most of us will be traveling. And then keep in touch. In addition to, if you haven't checked it out yet, last Sunday, Reverend Ethan Stark did a great diesel blot ritual, so you'll want to watch that, or you can go all the way back to when I did our alpha blot. And if you haven't already, smash that like and subscribe button. It helps people see stuff.
Yep.
And thank you guys so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you, Piper. Thank you, Jay. We will see everybody next week. Take care.
You have a lovely night.